Welcome everyone to another Funeral Consumers Alliance webinar. I'm Sarah Williams, President of Funeral Consumers Alliance, and I want you all to know that FCA is alive and well, now with 8 board members and an executive assistant. Each of us is dedicated to the FCA mission of protecting consumer funerary rights, and we appreciate your support. Please visit and utilize all the many resources at our website, funerals.org. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Please mute yourselves. And please hold your questions until the end of the presentation. Or if you'd like, you can put your questions in the chat box and we'll get to those at the end. Tonight, it is my pleasure to welcome Brock Sheets, co-founder of WillowWise, an online memorial website, an online memorial provider. I am so inspired by Brock's backstory, and I'm going to share that with you now. His father died unexpectedly from COVID in 2021, and there was simply no logistical way to gather friends and family who lived all across the United States. And because his father had served as a pastor in 11 different churches across 5 states. Well, Brock had a background in virtual education and marketing, so he created a beautiful tribute website and a memorial service for his father. And over 500 people were able to attend. Tonight, Brock will explain his use of user-friendly technology platforms and empathetic project management skills to create powerful and moving memorial experiences. Brock, welcome.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I really appreciate it, and I'm so honored to be here. In fact, when I first learned about the Funeral Consumers Alliance, I immediately joined the Idaho chapter, affiliate, I guess you call them. And so I joined the Idaho affiliate, and they needed some help with the board. So I was like, well, sure. So I raised my hand, and I'm now on the board of the Idaho affiliate of the FCA. And so just love the mission to really empower people to do funerals well and to empower consumer choice in this really important space. So tonight we're going to talk about virtual memorial gatherings. And I guess because I do this, that makes me a pro. However, I think Sarah alluded to this. My story actually began long before I started WillowWise and long before my dad passed away. I worked for a defense association in Washington, D.C. And in that role, I oversaw all of the webinars and the online professional development courses, the websites, and all of the international board meetings that all the international board meetings that we would host online all kind of fell to me. So I had experience doing webinars, I had experience doing online meetings, I had experience doing websites. And when my dad passed away unexpectedly, I knew I had the experience to potentially build something, but full disclosure, I hired what is now a competitor to do his service because I knew it was really important for me to be present in the content, not the wizard behind the curtain fiddling knobs. And it was after the dust settled on that process that I said, you know what, there is a tremendous opportunity. My wife and I said, there's a tremendous opportunity here to use what I know and to do this a little bit better than even what we experienced, and to really help people in this really powerful way, because I think there's something really, really important about, first of all, memorials. I think our memorial services in particular are exceptionally important. And I think there's a real power in gathering virtually. So we'll start the conversation by talking about why gather at all? Are funerals, memorial services, or celebrations of life really needed? And I think there's this myth that memorial services are for the deceased. But in reality, memorial services are for us who remain. I hear this sometimes from prospective clients where they talk about, my loved one didn't want a memorial service; they just want a website or something like that. I don't want people to make a fuss over me, and I think there's some true humility in those kind of statements, but I also think there's some naivety in those statements, about not, they don't want to burden their loved ones. But ultimately, as we can see, the service, a memorial gathering is about them, but it's for us that remain. And so honoring our loved ones collectively and saying goodbye is a vital step in our grief process that brings tremendous healing. So when somebody says, I don't want a service or I don't want a funeral, I understand that sentiment, but I think ultimately they're they're a really important step for us to take as the surviving family and friends to really honor them and celebrate their impact on us. And we all benefit from that process. So I think with that kind of agreement, I think that's why it's important to discuss why memorial services are important. So, okay, we've determined that it's important that we gather and we honor our loved one, but why virtual? Why should we consider this after the pandemic? I mean, the pandemic's over. Can't we just get back to normal life and ignore that we have to do things on Zoom and on virtual meeting platforms? And I think there's some truth to that, but I think there's also some very, very real benefits as to why they should still be considered after the pandemic. So we've got a poll that we're going to take here. And so if April can pull that up, this poll talks about travel. And essentially, and it'll pop up here in just a second, essentially what this is about, how are we doing on that poll, April? Essentially what this poll question addresses is, if you can imagine, if you put yourself in the place of your loved ones, let's say the worst happened and you just passed away, and now your loved ones have to build a funeral or a memorial service or a celebration of life for you within the next few weeks. How many of you would have people who would want to attend, but would be unable to because of timing, because of travel expenses, whether that be airfare, hotels, rental cars, work schedules, childcare, any number of reasons? How many of you have people? And April, how are we doing on that poll? I know we have oh, sorry. You know what? I just realized here's a poll. And this should have popped up so you could see it. So you can imagine your own memorial service or celebration of life. And the options are, nobody from out of town would come. Everybody I know lives close to me. Like, I don't have anybody remote. Or maybe there's, about less than 10 people that would attend something virtually. Maybe it's 10 to 25. Maybe it's 26 to 50. Maybe it's 51 to 100. I'm not going to lie, and I'm not going to act humble right now. I've lived in many different places across the US, and I shouldn't say I'm only 44. I'm 44 years old. So the vast majority of my peers are still alive. So I can safely say with confidence that there are more than 100 people. If I were to die tonight and my family needed to plan a service for me within the next couple of weeks, there are more than 100 people in my life who would want to attend to honor me or to celebrate my life, but wouldn't be able to travel. So I'm going to hit submit, and I would ask you to do the same. And April, if you can go ahead and show our results and see, I would just like to see what that kind of came from the audience. So it looks like, all right. So kind of as I suspected, nobody answered nobody. Everybody I know lives close to me. 24% of you said, less than 10 people. 38% was our largest result, between 10 to 25 people. And then about 20% said 26 to 50 people. About 10% said 51 to 100. And then 8% said over 100 people wouldn't be able to travel to attend. So this poll right here that we just took kind of gives you the reason why I think virtual services are still worth your consideration, even today, post-pandemic. So, and in today's day and age, nearly everyone has a vast geographic impact. Bereavement travel is always last minute and expensive. There's a reality, and it's pretty funny, but it's not funny. You can't buy tickets. You can't buy plane tickets and reserve a hotel 4 months in advance for bereavement travel the same way you could for a vacation. We don't know when people are going to die, and so it's always going to be last minute and expensive. So gathering virtually offers tremendous cost savings. It also represents a great environmental savings as well. You're not having to travel, so that carbon footprint, if that's important to you, is a vast savings in that regard. And then also virtual services open up the pool of participants that knew and want to honor your loved one. I had a friend of mine from college who passed away tragically, and he lived in Indiana, and I could not make it back there to attend his service, and I really would have loved to. And I think we all have stories like that of people that we would have loved to have attended and honored them. So when we talk about online memorials, there's sort of two components. And the first component would be the memorial website, which I like to call the headstone of the future. And this is sort of separate from the gathering, but I do think it's a really important part of this process, namely because it offers the most important information about the service times. So this is actually my dad's memorial website. It lives at honoringdavidsheets.com. You are welcome to go check it out. There's some really cool stuff there. But if you were going to do, if you had to host something for a loved one, I strongly recommend starting with a memorial website. And this is something that funeral homes and crematoriums often do. I wouldn't say that they're a standalone website like this. They tend to be more of a web page, an obituary listing, and they might have some similar features, but there's also some really vast differences that a full featured memorial website can offer. So number one, if you're doing a virtual service, this website can act as the announcement for the date and time of that service, and it can be the place where people register to attend. So, they can click, same way you registered for this webinar, you can do the same thing for an online memorial service. There's a couple of other things really neat about, considerations as you go out to build a memorial website. You want to think about the design. Is it something that's attractive? Does it reflect my loved one? In this case, my dad, he was actually a music minister. So he played piano, he directed choirs his whole life, his whole career, and Great Is Thy Faithfulness was his favorite hymn. So this particular image was, this background image is something that's like really unique to him and really special for him. And it captures just a small essence of who he is. And it's kind of a really neat artistic image that can kind of fall off in the background. We can include, obituary text. And then this is really where the power of a memorial website can come in. We can include, photo galleries, which, obituary pages can do. But this is really something that's really powerful. We can embed specialty content, or you can, if you're building a website, you can embed specialty content into that memorial website. In my dad's case, I mentioned he was a music minister, and we actually hired a production company to build this piece, which was a virtual choir that had over, I think it was like 65 people be a part of this choir and actually sing this song virtually, which if you get the chance, you should go check this out because it's really, really cool. But this is just something that's like very unique to my dad, because all of these people served under his choral direction at one time or another. So this is the kind of customizability that you can add to a full featured memorial website that you might not be able to do with a cookie cutter obit page from a funeral home, or those kind of resources. The photo gallery, you can put a lot more photos in there. We can also create like a donation portal. So if there's a cause or a charity that means something to your loved one, or is important to you, we can link out to that. Or you can even, like, if you've set up a GoFundMe or something like that to raise funds for the funeral expenses, we can also link out to that GoFundMe or that fundraising effort. And then lastly, you can see the guest book, where people can post memories and photos. And you can see, this is kind of cool that people can come back here. In fact, I revisited this, on the 2-year anniversary of his passing, and could kind of revisit and reread all of the comments that were shared in the guest book. So this is a really powerful thing, because it's a lot more than just a few lines on a headstone. This is something that lives online and can be visited from anywhere. I mean, we all have computers in our pockets nowadays. So I don't have to travel to go and visit and remember my dad, to look at photos and to see things like that. Some other ideas that you can include in a memorial website. This is my grandma's memorial website. And my grandma and grandpa actually recorded an album back in the early 80s, maybe late 70s, early 80s. They recorded an album on vinyl, and my aunt actually took that vinyl album and had it digitized. And then she uploaded all of the tracks to SoundCloud. So you can like come to their memorial website and click play and actually hear my grandparents singing from way back in the day, which I think that's just such a cool thing to be able to do on their memorial website. Couple of other, ideas. This gentleman was a high school theater teacher, and his wife captured an impromptu monologue that he did at a Shakespeare festival, where he hopped up on stage and did this monologue from Othello, and she wanted that included on his memorial website. We've also had clients who want a poem, on their memorial website. So this is kind of another really cool thing. You could do poems or scripture passages that mean a lot to your loved one. And then in this particular case as well, this client was actually a very accomplished author, and so we put all of her books with links to where you can buy the book on Amazon on her memorial website. So this is a really powerful way of remembering her and remembering her contributions to the world by looking at her books or purchasing her books, and seeing her, her professional impact. So that's kind of, I mean, that's just like a small sampling of things that can be included on a full featured memorial website. Some of the design considerations you want to take in mind is it beautiful? Like, is it a pleasing website? Is it easily navigable? And then obviously in today's day and age, it's really important that it be mobile friendly. You need to be able to view that on any device. Really, really important. So those are memorial websites, and that's I think a really important part of anytime somebody passes. I think that a memorial website is a really powerful way of pointing people sort of to a single source of truth of where this is where the service dates and times are going to be. This is where the obituary text is going to be. This is where the guest book is going to be. This is where kind of all things are going to live at that point. So we're going to transition into talking about the actual gathering, about bringing people together online. And so as we do this, there's another poll that we're going to pull up here. And this poll is related to observer versus participant. So, and if you can imagine, and probably most of us here have done this, if you've ever watched a remote live stream of an in-person event, maybe a church service, a funeral, a work conference, or like an association conference. If you've watched that live stream of an in-person gathering, would you classify yourself as an observer of that event or as a full participant of that event? I know for me, when I watch church online, it is not the same as being there. It just is not. So for me, I know that when I watch church online, I'm merely an observer. And so I would just invite you to cast your votes, cast your results in that poll. And April, if you can go ahead and show us the results of that poll. Let's see here. Do we have that poll? Here we go. Okay. So just as I kind of expected, yes, 75% said I was an observer when I was watching a live stream versus I was a full participant. So the vast majority of us don't find a live stream to be an adequate, it's not an adequate representation of participating in the event. So, and there's a reason for that. With a live stream of a hybrid event, meaning there's an in-person audience and it's being broadcast out, there's two vastly different experiences happening. There's the in-person experience, which is very different than what the online attendees are experiencing. In this instance, online attendees are just observers. They're watching something that's taking place somewhere else, and there's not really any interaction between the online and the in-person audience. Versus a fully virtual event, it's one unified experience. What we're doing right now is a fully virtual experience, okay? You are participating by casting your vote in the poll. You're participating by typing your questions in the Q&A. So in that regard, I realize we don't have mic and webcam rights turned on for everybody, and that's kind of strategic so that there aren't interruptions. But the idea here is that even though we're in a webinar room and you don't have maybe your mic and webcam turned on, you are still able to participate in this event by casting your votes in the poll and by typing in the chat or by typing your questions in the Q&A. So what we're going to talk about moving forward is a fully virtual experience. And there are companies that can help you with a live stream, and there is value in those. But I just want to kind of caution everybody to be aware that live stream hybrid events are different than fully virtual events. And for my personal preference, and by the way, we do both. We can help with live stream. We can do fully virtual. My personal preference, I prefer the fully virtual experience because it is more immersive, it is more engaging, and everybody is on a level playing field. So when we talk about gathering online, there's two different types of gatherings that you can do. And I'm going to use sort of a physical analog representation of what that would be. And the first would be a memorial service or a celebration of life or a funeral that takes place in a sanctuary or a funeral home or a synagogue. And that's where we've worked together to build an order of service. We know who we want to speak in this order. We've been strategic about who we want to speak in that order of service. And we've invited those speakers to speak. And those speakers are going to go up onto the platform and they're going to stand behind the podium and talk while the rest of us are seated in rows. And it's not really a two-way conversation. That's sort of the first space. And then the second space would be, we've moved from the sanctuary over into the fellowship hall. And depending on the kind of church that you grow up in, the fellowship halls I grew up in had punch and little cucumber sandwiches. I don't know, it was really boring. It was, but I love my church. And so that's the two different types of spaces that we want to try and represent. That fellowship hall space being a lot more organic conversations where there is no order of service per se. It's just all of us getting together to celebrate and honor our loved one. And so we're going to talk about the formal service first, which would be, a memorial service, a celebration of life, a funeral, depending on what name you want to call it. There are some really important technology considerations that you want to have. Using that sanctuary versus fellowship hall analogy, what you want to consider if you want somebody on a platform talking, and much like I am right now, I mean, you can kind of imagine we're in a webinar room, and that is different than a meeting room. A webinar room is more of a broadcast where attendees do not have their mic and webcams turned on. And that would be similar to all of you folks are seated in rows listening to me talk, and hopefully it's not mind-numbingly boring. So in that sanctuary space, we're going to use a webinar platform. You want to probably choose a webinar platform because you don't want people getting on with hot mics and, going, I can't, can everybody see me? You don't want that happening during a formal service. And so that's the strength of using a webinar platform, is that you don't get those types of interruptions because the attendees don't have mic and webcam rights in that space. So that means we can be very orderly about what we go through. Then you also want to think about planning the order of service. And there's a number of ways, there are myriads of ways that you can plan an order of service, but there's, I think, and like I said, I come from a long line. I come from a family of pastors. In fact, I've got a lot of relatives who are pastors, and I love pastors. I love what they do. I love what celebrants do. They really add the ability to bring comfort and care into a grieving space. But I also think that a lot of times we lose some of the joy, and we lose some of the impact of that service by allowing them to talk the most, by allowing a celebrant who may or may not have known your loved one to talk the most. We actually don't get to hear maybe enough about our loved one. And so one of the things that I recommend, and for these memorial services or celebrations of life, we have a template that we use that works really well for a lot of clients. We like to imagine that the person's loved one was a diamond, and everybody who knew that person knew them from only one or maybe two relational facets. So maybe they knew them as a family member, maybe they knew them as a friend or a coworker. And so what we do through these orders of service is try and hear from all of the facets of the diamond by hearing from family members. What was the decedent like as a mother, father, brother, sister, cousin, nephew, uncle, whatever those relational connections are? How was that person in those relationships? How were they in the social construct? Let's hear from some of their friends, what it was like to be their friend, how they impacted the lives of their friends. Let's hear from, if it makes sense, and they've got a recent work history. Let's hear from their coworkers or their employers or employees about their impact on the marketplace and what it was like, what kind of a person they were like in the workplace. And then lastly, what were they like in a philanthropic sense? Were they involved in any causes or charities or ministries? Did they give of themselves to causes that they cared about? And is that something that we can highlight and have that facet of the diamond represented? And then there are ways that we can make that room feel intimate. For example, we can imagine if we were all gathered together in person, there would be people seated on the front row. Usually the closest immediate family would be seated on the front row, and we would see the backs of their heads as they react to what's being shared up on the platform. Well, in that virtual environment, we don't want it to feel dry. We don't want it to feel like there's nobody else here. So we can enable chat so all the attendees can type in the chat. And what if we invite that front row, those people who would be seated in the front row, what if we invite them to be visible on webcam underneath the on-stage content? So this is the person who's up behind the podium speaking. And then we make all the attendees visible. Sorry, not all the attendees, but the front row, the immediate family, what if we make them visible so that we can see them reacting to the same laugh lines that we're laughing at, or crying at the same things that we're crying about? What we can do is really warm up that room so it doesn't feel sterile and it doesn't feel like it's lacking anything, really. There's also a really important part of, do we want to have the speakers on that order of service pre-record themselves, or do we want them to present live? And that may be a paradigm shift. Like, people may not realize that's even an option. For all you know, I could be presenting this. This could be pre-recorded. I'm just talking to my webcam right now. I can't see any of you. I can't see your audience reactions. I can't see if you're laughing. I can't see if you hate this. I can't get a gauge on any of those things. So there is a tremendous value in possibly pre-recording. And the value would be, there's actually a number of things, but the biggest would be eliminating internet gremlins. So I do this day in, day out. I've got a really robust internet connection and really modern equipment and this really nice podcasting mic and, lights back here that you can't see. And I've got a decently pleasing background, so I do this all the time. But a lot of people don't have that. They don't have a dedicated sort of broadcast space or setup. And they might be on an old computer or an old or a really slow internet connection. Maybe their internet connection is fast enough for downloading and like watching Netflix, but they might not have adequate upload speeds, because the reality is right now I'm using a lot of upload speed by broadcasting my HD webcam and my high definition microphone. So there's some really important, hardware considerations that pre-recording kind of eliminate. And so the cameras and the microphones on these guys are tremendously powerful nowadays. And we can invite those people to pre-record themselves, and then we can edit it together. And you can do things like adding lower thirds graphics, which I'll just kind of show you really quickly, as if we were, like you see on the news, where when one speaker comes up and we transition to the next, we can see their name and their relationship to the deceased. So we can add really nice transitions. The other thing by pre-recording is you don't get anybody saying, yeah, can everybody hear me? Can you see my screen? Am I unmuted? Like, you don't get any of that because they've recorded on their phone. They've reviewed the video ahead of time. Like, they know that they're going to be audible. So you don't get any of those kind of glitches that you would if somebody's presenting live. So those are kind of considerations that you want to take into account. Do I want to have live presenters, or do I want to ask my order of service, people on the order of service, do I want to ask them to pre-record and then edit those together, so we've got a bit more seamless. The other thing that can do is if you ask somebody to talk for 3 to 5 minutes and they hit done and they've gone 12 minutes, well, they know they can do another take. And that's really powerful as well, is that they're not locked into that first take. They can go ahead and record that again and then submit a new version. So it just requires some prior planning to do the pre-recording, but it really does really end up being worthwhile, and the experience for everybody tends to be really high quality. So we've built this beautiful order of service. We've talked about the diamond that was our loved one. We've maybe even done a memorial slideshow video set to music. And we've had people, oh, I should mention, in that service, you can have people sing, you can have people do poem readings, scripture readings, candle lightings. As long as they pre-record that or do that live from behind their webinar, behind their webcam, you can incorporate all of the same content that you would as if you were gathered in a church. So we've just beautifully honored our loved one. We've talked about all of the facets of the diamond, and this has stirred up all kinds of feelings and emotions and joy and tears from people who are in attendance. What we don't want to do is leave the sanctuary without talking to anyone, because that would be a tremendous emotional letdown. And so that's where memorial receptions come into play. And if we can move into the proverbial online fellowship hall, that would be where we've got the opportunity to all share and discuss with one another stories about our loved one, things that came up in that service. Maybe we see somebody across the miles and the time zones that we haven't seen. Oh, I used to change your diapers. Those kind of comments always come out in this sort of a meeting space where we've transitioned from a webinar room over into a meeting room where now everybody has mic and webcam access. Everybody can share and can talk about what they just experienced and what came up in them, and they can offer their condolences. And it's really a beautiful kind of family reunion time. So again, some technology considerations is you want to use a meeting room, not a webinar platform, for this reception space, because we want everybody to be able to take part. So some technology considerations, again, would be, is it a browser-based platform, or is it a platform that requires you to download an app? Both have their strengths. I find that if you require people to download an app, particularly for elderly attendees, that can be a barrier to them attending smoothly and seamlessly. So can we use browser-based solutions in order to really make sure that we've lowered the bar to entry so that pretty much anybody can enter? We also want to make sure that it stays orderly. Like I said, over 100 people would want to attend my memorial service if it had to happen in the next couple of weeks. That could be a little bit crazy in a meeting room. So is there somebody shepherding that space, muting hot mics that shouldn't be muting? Is there somebody who's taking control? I say that loosely, kind of taking control of that room and just kind of creating bumpers like at the bowling alley so we don't go off into the gutter. Is there somebody who's kind of keeping the ball in the lane and keeping the discussion moving forward? Who's going to act in that role? Because we don't just want to open up the room and have it be the Wild West where nobody's in charge. Also, does the platform that we're choosing, does it allow us to record that meeting? Because there's some really beautiful things that come out of those meeting spaces, those reception spaces, that we would love to have after the fact. So can we edit the recording of the reception and add it to the beginning of, or to the end of the service when we go to watch this on demand? And can we have it available on the website on demand? You know, here on my dad's memorial website, you can watch his recorded service. Unfortunately, we didn't get his reception captured because that wasn't something that was available to us at that time. But that is something that's available now, where you can get the reception recorded and added to the end of the service. So those are some of the ideas. Now, everything I've just talked about might be really daunting, and it is. I'm not going to lie. I chose to, even though I had experience doing all of this for my dad's service, it was really important for me to be present in the content. I didn't want to be the wizard behind the curtain, fiddling knobs, answering technical questions, providing tech support, uh, dealing with relatives who couldn't get connected. I didn't want to be that person. I needed to be present in the content. And I needed my mom and my sister, like I needed our immediate family to not be the ones driving the technological bus, so to speak. So that's why I hired a company to do my dad's service. Ended up rebuilding all of it after the fact. But so maybe you've watched all of this, you've heard everything that I've talked about, and you've gone, yeah, you're right, Brock. Like this is a lot of work, and it is. I'd rather hire a pro to do this. Okay, I agree. I would too. So what do we do for vendor selection? Who should I choose? There are just some things to keep in mind. You want to keep in mind their experience. You know, how many of these have they done? Are they familiar with the platforms they're using? We just experienced this at the start of this webinar, where we're running into some technological glitches because we're not entirely familiar with this platform. And no matter how well you prepare for it ahead of time, you will, the first time you use a webinar platform, you're going to learn things and go, oh, I probably want to change that setting and that setting and that setting. And if you're doing this yourself, you got one shot. So you don't really have the opportunity to learn iteratively the way a vendor would, where they've got their webinar platform dialed in and they have all the settings dialed in, where it really is a seamless experience and it's really beautiful. So you want to just check their experience. You also want to see the project management side of things. This is really important. And this is something that I think, you know, that I think we don't often think about is how much work goes into planning a service. And I'm not just talking about from a vendor perspective. I mean, from a client perspective, you know, if God forbid I had another family member pass away, there's a lot of work that goes into gathering photos for a photo gallery, gathering photos for the slideshow video, choosing a song, choosing, in getting obituary text written. These things are things that a vendor really can't do for you because they don't have all the details. They don't have the content. We can provide a good repository. We can provide really good project management. But what we want to make sure of is that we're communicating well all of the different deliverables, whether that's the vendor or whether that's the client who needs to deliver these things. What's the timeline we need to deliver them? What's the status? And then where do these assets live? This kind of project management is really important in the process and can really be a lifesaver, that I think is really powerful and really, really important. You also want to make sure they've got good organization, beyond just the project management side of things. How are we setting up all the folders? Are we using tools that are easy to use? And then how are their independent reviews? And the reality is anybody can, you can type anything on your own website. So how do you know that those reviews are real? And so one way to do that is to go check Google reviews or Trustpilot or I think Facebook reviews. There are a number of places where the vendor isn't in control of those reviews, and you want to be able to see those reviews and see the good and the bad. Like, what were the negative reviews? what did people have to say? So what are the downsides of a fully virtual service? And this is really important. If there's anything we learned in the pandemic, we have a crucial need for hugs, for physical touch, for that kind of comfort when we meet in person. So how do we get that when we're doing a fully virtual service? And there's a number of ways that we can do this. And so what I often recommend to clients is that they do a fully virtual service and reception combined with an in-person traditional viewing or visitation, or a local in-person gathering for dinner, toast, refreshments, or maybe an intimate burial service or ashes spreading ceremony. The point being, you want to make sure, even if we do a fully virtual experience, you still want to make sure that people can get together who are local and who can provide hugs around the neck. It's such an important part of what we do in this grieving process. So it's something that we really missed with my dad's service, because COVID was in full swing. So now that COVID's not in full swing, please do get together and get hugs around the neck. But maybe don't live stream that in-person gathering. Maybe take the gathering fully online for everybody, and then still do your in-person thing as a purely in-person, not a hybrid event. So that's it for me. I would love to hear questions. I think there have been some questions coming in. Sarah, have you been able to kind of filter through those and ask those to me?
I see a couple in the Q&A. Can you see the Q&A? And I think that April is going to handle this
Okay.
for you.
Okay.
Let me read the first one of the questions.
Sure.
Who does all this work to put together a virtual service? As nice as it sounds, I don't know anyone with these tech skills to build out such an event. Well, Joyce, I think you're just looking at your man right here, Brock Sheets.
I'm one of them. There are others.
Yes,
There are
sure.
others who shall remain nameless, but a simple Google search will find them. Yeah, so I see, a question about rough idea of cost, and it really, that is a really, really hard question. Because it really depends on the range of what you're trying to do. We've had clients who just want to do a website, which we can do free memorial obit pages. We do those for free. We can do, let's say you want to skip the formal service and you just want to do that kind of fellowship hall reception space. We can do those for, $650. There are, and then there's building slideshow videos, there's pre-recording and editing videos together. So the full gatherings, depending on schedules and when you want that service, it can cost anywhere from $650 up to $2,500. So there's a pretty big range in there, depending on what you want. Some of the things that we've also done for clients, and there's also additional costs if we've got a client who he was called the Johnny Carson of the deaf community. He actually ran a TV show. He was the host of a TV show for the deaf community, and he was instrumental in he was instrumental in putting, getting content out for the deaf community. And so for his service, we need to caption everything. So everybody's going to pre-record themselves, but then we've got to add closed captioning so all of the deaf community can hear or can read what's taking place. And then vice versa, when we've got deaf speakers who are signing, or when we've got people using sign language, we need to have that for all of us who don't do sign language and who don't speak in sign language. So those are some added costs, but the beauty of doing it virtually is that you get to have that kind of flexibility. You get to be creative like that, in really coming up with solutions that are really unique. What other kind of questions do we have?
Brock,
Yes.
one of the questions from the registration was how much lead time would someone need to do a service like this?
Yeah. So the answer to that question is a bit complex. So it depends